So playing as Aztecs or any of the other the Mesopotamic area civilizations, uh, how do you play them? And we've passed the colonization era. So the most important thing you have to know about them is their religion, which limits a lot of their activities and how you play them. So, uh, as you know from history, their religion has been a lot about sacrifices, and especially human sacrifices. Otherwise, if you don't sacrifice, the end of the world is gonna come. So, in European Universalis, they have something called the doom meter. And when you reach 100, uh, the end of the world has come, and you'll receive a big negative bonuses. So your goal is to not reach it. In order to minimize it, you have to uh, make reforms. But in order to do these, there are some requirements. First of all, you have to have at least 5 vassals. So this means you'll be constantly going to war with these other nations to vassalize them, uh, and also you have to keep the doom under 50. So for example, if you play as Aztecs, the standard starting value is +4 doom every year. This can be changed by random events. Some reduce the doom, maybe at some cost. Some increase the doom. Uh, Also, the doom can be increased by taking provinces. Uh, it works that, for example, if I win a war and I take another province, the doom would be not 4 but 5 per year. So actually you are interested in just taking at the beginning, just taking the vassals as fast as possible and doing these reforms as fast as possible, and not taking any provinces from your enemies. Afterwards, when you there are 5 reforms in total. Afterwards, when you take one reform, your doom per year is reduced by 20%, and when you take 2 by 40, and when you finally do all the 5 reforms, your doom doesn't increase all by itself. So at that point, you can easily take provinces from others. But you could also take them faster before, especially maybe to limit the potential of the others, to make them weaker, so your job of reforming is easier. But you can't take a lot of provinces at the beginning of the game, because it will be devastating for your doom and you won't be able to do the reforms. And also, what you have to know is that with the latest updates and the expansions, you don't even have feudalism as an institution. It says 0 and it doesn't grow by itself. And also, it's important to know that primitive countries, such as this one, cannot embrace institutions. So even if you spend a lot of admin points or monarch points in general, and you reach 100%, you still won't be able to embrace the institution. Although it's important to note that if, for example, you actually did get with monarch points to 100 in a province, it would spread in neighboring provinces afterwards. But I'll get back to that later. So playing with one of these nations is difficult. It really depends a lot on how the allies are made, and any random events and so on. So it it may be that you have to restart quite a few times to get a good start, a good rhythm going. So, for example, in one game I was able to get 2 reforms out in like less than 20 years from the game start. So that felt quite quick. But in another start, it was already in the 70s, so maybe almost 30 years, and I wasn't being able to get past the first reform just because of peace treaties, and also difficult alliances and vassals to other states. So it depends a lot. Also, you have very limited resources. You don't have that much money. You have limited force limits, a limited manpower as well. So one or maybe a few bad choices could lead that even you are vassalized in the end. And especially that since you need 5 vassals to complete the reforms, you won't have much allies either. I usually try to get, for example, one of these nations to help me, because I usually vassalize these that are close to me, because you don't get their special casus against them. See, for example, I have no against this one, but I get special flower wars against the neighboring countries. So, and also the vassalizing and using them to help you becomes harder and harder, because after a few wars you'll get practically with relations with everyone at -200, because you force vassalize them, and they see you a tyrant overlord, and you have an aggressive expansion as well, and you just cannot bring it back to normal levels. So at that point, it might happen that even if you have, let's say, 4 vassals and you just need one more, those 4 won't help you in a war, because you can't, because their liberty desire will be quite high. So that's something you have to remember. Also, how you proceed with technology. So one of your main priorities should be touching up administrative as fast as possible. So you can at level 5 get your first idea group, and you should be taking exploration ideas so you can expand beyond this area, that is very important. But also I found it very useful to actually at the beginning of the game to concentrate by setting a national focus on military, so you get these military bonuses that comes because at the first levels you can see, for example, the shock is increasing at also at level 2. uh, Although fire in the early game is not important, it also can increase. But most importantly, if you get to level 5 quickly, you'll be and also at that moment you have already 2 shock improvements. You'll be able to attack others very easily. uh, in one of my tries, I had a game where I was almost done with my reforms, but I neglected. I was moving for the admin tech and idea groups, and I neglected my military touching up, and I was at level, not sure which level I was, but the the Tlaxcala was already a few ahead of me, and even at with a larger stack, I I was just obliterated. So it's you have to stay in front of the others so you can win those wars easily, because your manpower is going to be your main issue here. With so yeah, with starting manpower maximum of 11,000, increasing by 100 each month, uh, your wars are going to be very long if you want actually to recover your manpower. So so those extra shocks is going to be very important. Also, later in the game, about the institutions, it's I found it that you shouldn't try spreading the institution by upgrading your provinces, because even if you get to the 100% and you got the feudalism in one of your provinces, it spreads. Yes, it spreads to the other provinces, but as a primitive nation you cannot embrace. And how do you get from this primitive status away? You have to reform the religion. You need all the 5 reforms, and also you need to be next to a westernized nation. Well, not it's not mandatory to be Western, but it in practice it will be always a Western nation, united. It will be England, Great Britain, it will be Spain, Portugal, maybe Norway, but mostly like one of those big nations, which also historically was first to the Americas. So, and you need to be next to him with your provinces. So, and what happens when you are next to him and you press this reform religion is that you get all the difference in technology levels. As well, you also embrace all the institutions the target has embraced already. So even if you don't have feudalism yourself in your provinces, you have nothing. You could jump. Depends on how far are you in the game when you do this, but you could jump. I for example did jump to colonism. So I embraced all these 3 at the same time, and as well I got quite a few technology levels. Not sure how many exactly, but it was in the roughly for like 3, 4, maybe even 5 levels in some of the things like diplomacy, which I had the lowest. So you get a lot of levels, you get all the institutions that person has, which are you next to. So it's very beneficial. So you don't have to try to spread the institutions actually before you're able to reform yourself. So that's very important. Also about the colonies, uh, it's maybe quite a bit luck based how fast you can reform the religion, because it depends on where the colonists settle. For example, in one of my tries, they did land quite close to me in the northern parts of South America. So I annexed one of the primitive nations over there and made one or two colonies next to it, and I was able to reform. So yeah, it's also important to note that since primitive nations don't have ships at all, you cannot colonize somewhere further away at the coastline. You can only colonize uh, provinces which are next to your core provinces. So, for example, if you want to go from this area to South America, you have to do this one by one in order. So it takes a lot of time. So if the first colonists actually went somewhere more in the Brazil area, it's going to take quite a bit of time to actually be able to do the reforms. So so yeah, that's about it. And when you actually able to reform, then it depends on it's a completely different game of quite a few things. First, you have to colonize and expand. Also, you have to decide whether you should attack at some point or try to be friendly with the colonists. Uh, the most likely scenario is that the closer to the start you have to be uh, friendly, because you won't be able to fight them actually. Uh, but it may change over time. Also depends on how many colonial nations are there. Maybe you could, in the long run, get some allies because of rivalries between them. But it depends really a lot on the situation. And thirdly, you can and you should go for the nations in South America, which are still primitive nations. And since you have already finished colonial ideas, uh, you you'll be able to attack them without having a claims, and you'll be able to annex a lot of land, as well as there are quite a few gold provinces in the South American in the western part of South America, in colonial Peru area. So that will be very beneficial. And the gold is very important because there's quite a few of, of provinces both in this area. For example, you can see these provinces, uh, as well as there are quite a few in South America. At the beginning of the game you have very little gold income because it's not used, but once you do the reform, uh, you'll get a lot more. So for example, in my playthrough I went from like having gold income of like 2 something, to I went to, after the reform I got like 16 each month. So it's a huge difference and you get a huge economy boost afterwards. So yeah, those are the main points you have to know about playing in the Central America. It's not easy. It's going to take quite a few tries, and a lot of headaches as well, but it's doable. But it's definitely not an easy start. I wouldn't say it's the hardest start, because there are probably a lot harder nations to do. For example, in Middle East or Asia, some small nations which are doomed to be overrun by the Ottomans as very early in the game, or by somebody else. But yeah, these are also very hard starts, because the starts might not actually be that hard, but uh, you'll be going against the clock to do the reforms as fast as possible, to expand as fast as possible, and to uh, be able to survive any attacks from the colonists, and also uh, be able to fight them if you need, because uh, the colonial nations are quite a few. They'll be expanding quickly, and once they run out of provinces to colonize, they will attack you, because they have uh, the CBs and the colonial nation, so, and they see as their territory. So you'll end up in a war and hostile relations. So it's a it's a mix of getting there, become strong enough to be able to fight fight them, ideally to actually take some of their provinces from their colonial nations. And also, so it's also a balance of not getting letting them grow too big, so that the colonial nations themselves have significant armies that you have to difficulties fighting. So yeah, those are mostly the main points you have to know about how to play with these nations, and the basics. Uh, Otherwise, it depends really a lot on your overall EU4 experience. Uh, you definitely shouldn't play these if you haven't played much of EU. You should try with something easier in Europe. This is probably for more advanced and experienced players, but it's definitely not one of those impossible starts.